Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl, Jasmine. I look very under the weather still, but I wanted to talk about something. So, basically, I remember a while back I posted about how that Dochi anxiety song rubbed me completely wrong, and I could just sense the spiritual curse of anxiety in that song because it's literally a word curse in it's hidden in plain sight in the music personally, but anyone singing that song, listening to that song, is pretty much speaking anxiety over their life, right? And I remember every time I hear that song and it's gotten so popular on TikTok, it just it never sat right in my spirit. I was like, there's such a spiritual, there's a spiritual curse in that song. Um Anyways, I guess that's just having discernment with certain things, but I saw another creator talking about it, and did was specifically talking about that song. And I made a video talking about that weeks ago. Anyways, I feel like I wanted to share this because I feel like there's so much truth. I think this is where people get things kind of twisted because there's the truth, but then in a lot of new age spirituality movements and things, it's half truth, but not the full truth. So, manifestation versus prayer is kind of what I wanted to talk about, but also just how the Bible says life and death are in the power of the tongue. So basically, when someone is manifesting something over their life, right? To manifest, you're speaking certain things. What's the other thing people do? Affirmations, right? And affirmations is another form of manifestation in a lot of ways. So the Bible has already said that life and death are in the power of the tongue, meaning your own mouth, out of what you speak, you can either speak life or death, blessings or curses, right? So your words do hold power. That's biblical. But when people are manifesting, they are manifesting things according to their own will versus God's will. So that, in my opinion, is the difference between um, a prayer and trusting God versus manifesting and trying to create things for yourself out of your own power or of your own will. And I think New Age spirituality is pretty much a half truth where you're given some spiritual truths but not the full truth, because there is power in what you say. That's true even according to the Bible, but the Bible tells us that you have to be careful with what you say because literally life and death are in the power of the tongue. So the same way someone can speak blessings over people, um, people can speak curses over people. And that's kind of how I'm tying you know, a lot of music that people are listening to, especially secular music, has very, some of it is very hidden, but for me as a Christian, I feel like it's pretty obvious because it's just when your spiritual eyes are open to the realities of good and evil and demonic influences and spiritual influences in the world, it's like you see things a little bit more plain sight that people who don't have the Holy Spirit are not, um, I don't know, as strong in their faith, maybe don't recognize. And I think it's like you have to grow into that, um, to find those things or understand those things. There was a time where I was young, I was listening to all types of songs I had no business listening to. And I can think of one. I used to listen to this song. Well, I can't think of it right now, which is probably for the best, but it was like a very violent song, and it was like my favorite song to listen to. And I could not comfortably listen to that song now. It would it would irritate my spirit to listen to that song, because now that I'm actually aligned with the Holy Spirit and God's will, I can't comfortably do things that go against God. And I feel like that's part of when you are a lukewarm Christian, or even if you're just someone who's not truthfully practicing or committed to following the Bible or God's will in your life. You're constantly doing things that are compromising to your mind, your spirit. So the biggest thing was just a lot of music has very hidden messages in it, but there's also spiritual curses attached to it when you are singing those lyrics, right? Like people are going to be like, "Oh, it's just a song, it's just a song." No. Life and death are in the power of your tongue. You are speaking those words, whether it's singing them in the song or speaking them out loud plainly. It's like that's the trick, that's the deception. How the devil can trick someone into putting a word curse over themselves through a song. That's how the devil deceives people. Basically, it's just like the devil is very clever and manipulative, and a lot of people want to be like, "Oh, it's not that deep, it's not that deep." But it is. It's like the same people that are into this, all the spiritualness, and will tell you how, you have to manifest and affirm, and how what you speak holds power, and that's why you have to speak positive things over your life. Will ignore that a lot of the music you're listening to is actively speaking negative things over someone's life. Um, I talked about before how I have a hard time listening to certain songs and certain artists now. In my opinion, Billie Eilish, I don't hate Billie Eilish or anything. Like, this is not me attacking personally any of the people or the artists, but I definitely feel like Billie Eilish makes very depressing music. Like, if I was depressed, I would probably want to listen to Billie Eilish, because that is music that literally makes you feel depressed. I don't know. It puts you in a more emotional state. But what people don't realize is, like, a lot of these music have those spiritual things attached to them. So, like, anxiety, depression, anger, violence, suicidal thoughts, lust. I mean, how many songs do we have about sex and about sleeping around and all of those things? About partying, about doing drugs. There's like this other song, um, and I remember I was like, when you actually read the lyrics, you're like, I can't believe people are just blindly singing stuff like this. Um, it's a song by, I know it's by Chase Atlantic, and basically he says, is speaking like, it's like there's so much word curses in the music. basically. Um, as a Christian, I recognize that a lot more than I did when I was still lukewarm or still just, you know, didn't have the discernment that I have now. So it's just like I won't listen to certain songs anymore. It's hard for me to be comfortable listening to certain music. Like if it's not worship music, I'm like, I don't know. And then like throwback old songs are pretty much all I listen to now. But yeah, it's just like the same people that will say how, you know, there's all of these spiritual things that exist. And I feel like new age spirituality is borrowing is a form of spirituality that is, I mean, this is just how I understand it, because I think you have to be, you have to understand that someone, how the devil deceives people in general is that he gives them half truths. So there's some truth in what the new age spirituality movement is doing, right? If there was zero truth in it, it wouldn't, people wouldn't fall for it. But it's a deception because it's not the full truth. Like the spiritual practices people are participating in are actually forms of witchcraft that the Bible condemns. But the people participating in it, um, they're not being told like, oh, I'm doing witchcraft, or oh. And I mean, like, some people knowingly, willingly are doing it, knowing that it's witchcraft, and some people are like, oh, well, it's just manifestation and it's just law of attraction and blah blah blah. um all of these things are just basically forms of spirituality that are intended to take people away from God's will. And I think I said it in another video. It's honestly like the devil has been tempting people with the same lie for the past thousands of years, right? Like if you go back to the Genesis story in the Bible and understand like how the devil tricked Eve into disobeying God, right? And getting her out of God's will and getting her to not trust God, and Eve instead put her trust in Satan. Like the root of our sin is not trusting God. You know, well, God tells me not to do this, but I don't trust it, so I'm going to do this instead. That's the deception. That's like one of the roots of sin, was that they didn't trust. Eve didn't put her trust in God. She put her trust in what Satan told her. So God had given Adam and Eve the one rule: don't eat from this tree or you will surely die. He didn't just say don't eat from it, he told them the consequence of eating that was death, right? And they understood it. God said don't eat from this tree or we'll die. Like it wasn't like it was a warning that came with a guaranteed suffering for doing this, right? I also feel like people miss in that story that God giving them that rule also is what established the free will argument. It's like you don't have free will if you don't have a choice for or against something. Um that's just, you have to get deeper into that story. I feel like I've talked about it before. Anyways, back in the story of Adam and Eve, you know, God gives them the command, don't eat from this tree or you'll surely die. The devil then tempts Eve and says, oh, you're not going to die. That's the lie. Gives her the truth. You'll become like God, knowing it'll make you like God, knowing good and evil, because up until this point, God is fully aware of what is good and what is evil. Adam and Eve don't know good or evil. They're just existing. And in that sense, the reason that we were innocent and we couldn't sin because we didn't have knowledge of good and evil. It is knowledge of good and evil that allows us to be responsible for sin. That's what people misunderstand about the whole thing. It's like, if we were not knowledgeable of good or evil, we couldn't do wrong. You can't do wrong if good and evil are not, you don't understand good and evil. So God understood what was good and evil always. We didn't always know what was good and evil. But the devil tempts Eve to eat from this tree and tells her it'll make her like God, which it will make her like God. She thinks it's like, oh, I'll be as great as God. It's like the devil is constantly tempting people with the same lie. You can be God. You can be like God. You can be as powerful, as mighty, as all of those things. The same lie the enemy has been using for years and years and years and years and years. Anyways, Eve is tempted because Eve is tempted by her desire to be like God. She sees how great God is. She sees the power he has. She knows that God is greater than her. Eve is aware God created her. It's just like, it's not, it's like Adam and Eve had a full understanding of who God was. Um, that's important to understand. But anyways, so the lie, the deception is, God tells them they will surely die. The devil says, no, you're not going to die. That's the lie. God says you are going to for sure die. God's not lying when he said, eat from this tree, you will surely die. What people misunderstand about this whole story is God understood that if his creation had the ability to understand good and evil, that would make them capable of doing evil. And therefore, sin, like, it's just like your ability to do evil is what brings the curse of sin, but also what brings sin brings the curse of death. So God's like, if my creation is capable of doing evil, I can't allow them to live forever and ever and ever. Like, they're gonna have to die. But again, because God gave us free will, and we couldn't have free will without a choice. Like, if God just never gave them a command to follow whatever, they wouldn't have truly had free will. I feel like that's the other part of the story. It's like, God, the one rule God gave Adam and Eve, yes, it was a test of their faith in him, but it also was what allowed the free will, is what gave humanity free will. Because free will means you have to have a choice. So that command gave humanity a choice to either obey or disobey God freely. Without that choice, there was no option to go against God. It's like the freedom to go, free will is the ability to go against something. If you just have to do whatever you're told because you have no option, you're not free. Hope that makes sense to some people. So the the lie is that they weren't going to die. Now, the devil understood the curse of good and evil too. It's just like the devil was aware of good and evil. The lie was that they wouldn't die. So it really is just like when you really understand and break it down, it's just like God, when we are not trusting God, is how the enemy is able to deceive us. If you are not putting your trust in God fully, you're going to be more susceptible to the attacks and the deception and the lies of the enemy. So it's just like your faith in God and your trust in God is what protects you from the enemy. Um, and when it comes to like new age spirituality, manifestation, all of those things, those are not things that God created, right? Those are things, it's like I've said it in a, I feel like I know I've made so many different videos talking about different aspects of things. I can't tell you y'all what specific video, but I know I mentioned how the devil creates counterfeits to what God actually created. So it's a lot of the new age spirituality are counterfeits of spiritual practices that God created for his chosen people. It's just like Moses. It's just like when God was using Moses to do all of these miracles for Pharaoh, right? And even in the Bible, it talks about how the Egyptians were doing these miracles too, but they weren't miracles from God. They were miracles that were from um, the witchcraft. It's like witchcraft is not from God, right? It's from, I mean, I just have to say it's from the devil. It's like it's the counterfeit religion of spirituality. Basically, that the power is not coming from God. So Moses uses his staff, the staff. It's like God is doing all of these miracles through Moses, um, in front of the Egyptians, and it was like God was always proving he was greater, than the spiritual practices of these false gods. Um, and these false gods exist because of fallen angels, and these fallen angels have knowledge of the spiritual world, and spiritual laws. But they don't have the full power that God has, because it's like they're just counterfeits. So I mean, I just remember I saw someone have made a comment basically saying witchcraft is in like um God is God. Basically, they were trying to say God, like God was a wizard, and I'm like, girl, the deception, the deception you're under, because it's like people don't understand. It's like God God is God. He's the creator. God can do anything because he's not limited by anyone or anything. So if God wanted to turn the sun into the moon or whatever, he could at any point in time. It's like God already holds all power and authority over the world because he's the creator. So it's like God isn't doing witchcraft because God is just the authority of the world and of the earth. Like, God doesn't have to do witchcraft to get things to be his way. He just has to speak it and it becomes it. It's like whatever God speaks has to exist. It has to come forward because God is the ultimate authority in the world. He's the creator, the beginning and the end, Alpha, Omega, all of those things. So it's like people are being so deceived by, all just these lies. And I also think it really is just like the devil is still deceiving people the same way he deceived Adam and Eve with the same, trick. You can be like God, or you are God, or you're greater than God, or you hold more power. It's just like the same lies are being told to people over and over again. It's just not the truth. It's a deception. Um, but Moses was able to do the things because he trusted in God, not because he was doing witchcraft, not because it was his own power. It's just like witchcraft is basically saying you hold the power to control your own destiny. It's not a trust in God that is creating someone's ability to do witchcraft. It's like it's the opposition to trusting God in a lot of ways. And it's like the miracles that Jesus performed was through his trust in God. It's like everything that Jesus did, all the power Jesus had to heal, to cast out demons, all of those things that came directly from God. You know, Jesus had the same power God had to do all of those things. So it's just like witchcraft is you're not trusting God to do the things that you're doing. You're trusting yourself, you're trusting a potion, a spell, I don't know. But you're not putting your faith in God. That's the difference. And God doesn't have to do witchcraft to make things happen. He's just ultimate authority. So, no, this person basically tried to say, um, like, it's just like the deception people have. Crazy. But, um, yeah, God doesn't tell anyone and us anywhere in the Bible to do spells, to do this. And it's like there's laws, ceremonial laws that the Jews were practicing for cleanliness, for holiness, and all of those things. There's these purification rituals. It's like, yes, God created rituals for specific things, but these were actually the righteous ones. It's like I said, people are doing rituals that are not of God. It's like they're participating in counterfeit things that God did not actually create. It's like when the Jewish people had to do these rituals for purification before they could step place in the holy place. It's like God creates the original, and then the devil creates the counterfeit to it. And so now you have all of these counterfeit practices, um, that are borrowing from the truth of what God created, but they're not truly what God created. It's counterfeit. It's not the real deal. So that's, I guess, all I wanted to say.